Doesn't quite tilt, does it? Okay, there it is. Yes. Okay, I'm going to take off the bloody bandage. I cut myself on one of the little snack plates out there, so I hope this is not an omen. But I am happy to be here and very pleased at the invitation and pleased to read with these poets whom I'm discovering since I now live here. As Tom mentioned, I am from South Carolina originally, and I'll read some of the poems from my collection Ash, which deals a lot with my childhood growing up in South Carolina in a little rural town. And then I'll read some more recent work and more Georgia-inspired work. So this is my first time being back in the South since I went off to college about 25 years ago, I think. Long time ago. And so it's interesting being in the New South and being in a southern city, so it's my first experience of southern urban life. But I'll start with some poems from my childhood in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Childhood. Summer brought fireflies in swarms. They lit our evenings like dreams we thought we couldn't have. We caught them in jars, punched holes, carried them around for days. Luminous abdomens that when charged with air turn bright. Imagine mere insects carrying such cargo. Magical caravans flickering beneath low July skies. We chased them, amazed. The idea, those tiny bodies pulsing phosphorescence, they made reckless traffic, signaling neon flashes forever into the deepening dusk. They gave us new faith in the nasty tonics of childhood, pungent, murky liquids promising shining eyes, strong teeth, glowing skin, and we silently vowed to swallow ever after. What was the secret of light? We wanted their brilliance, small fires hovering, each tiny explosion the birth of a new world. So I grew up in South Carolina in the 60s and 70s. And in my small town, when I was in elementary school, the schools were still segregated, even though this was many, many, many years after Brown v. Board, and many years after that when schools that had remained in a state of de facto segregation were then converting to integration, and my schools in my town sort of lagged behind in that regard. And so for the first few years of elementary school, I went to an all-black school, even though the closest school, which was in walking distance of my house, was an all-white elementary school. So this poem talks about my experience in attending an integrated, formerly all-white elementary school for the first time. Froggy's Class, South Carolina, 1969. She was an old maid, Froggy was, and she was mean, with bulging eyes that strained more when she got cross, and a lumpy sack of gland-swollen throat. We thought her some crazy crone who took delight in chastising the innocent. Her classroom seemed our punishment, as we were dubbed the smart ones. But among our bunch, the usual stunts were devised, and her madness was the antidote to our attempts at anarchy. I have to stop here because I left out something important that you should know. So when I attended this school, as I said, it had previously been all white, and so I and my brother and sister and neighbors were among the first black kids in the school, and they also, for the first time, had black teachers in the school. So in the grade that I was in, they had 2 classes, and they had 2 teachers, one black, one white. So all the black kids who had just entered the school were put in the black teacher's class. And so after a few weeks in the class, they realized that I was not really suited to be in that class, that I was moving ahead of the material faster than I should have been. So they decided, okay, we'll put her in the other class. So then I became the only black kid in the formerly all-white class. Okay, continuing. I mostly don't remember her abuses, except the shrill, cracking voice that harangued us daily, or the hard-wrapped satisfaction of a ruler across knuckles. But in them, she was democratic. She also favored the word nigra, which made Tina Fogel snicker and eye me triumphantly. One day, reciting vocabulary, Stuart Williams, brilliant-haired, the class sweetheart, whose liberal parents no doubt had drilled its pronunciation, corrected her, loudly enunciating Negro amid a chorus of half-hearted mimics. Froggy bristled, glared at his cheerful nerviness. I loved him for it. Then, after the year-end spelling test, which I alone aced, she railed against my all-white peers, summoned me to stand before the knuckleheads, she said, or warned, might someday fall victim to my supervision. On the last day, silently driving me home, she pushed a heavy-bound notebook into my hands, and I, out of discomfort at being alone with her, and shame at my squalid small house, scrambled out of the car, barely caught, will make something of yourself, and college, and proud. Okay. Well, now I'm back in the South. I feel like this is a natural place to be reading this poem. I once read it in New York City, and people sort of looked at me like I was crazy. But then afterwards, someone came up to me and said that they were from the Midwest and that they knew all about outhouses. Outhouses. They flanked southern country homes like chimneys, humble stations, roof slanted like a tipped hat, a thing settling on its haunches. A skirt of high grass was a warning of unhabitation, human abandonment, a possible harborer of snakes. Building or moving them was communal, like a hog slaughter, and if we all had them, a leveler, like the idiot sibling, less shameful than a nuisance, easy to accept or overlook. They were also ignoble, embarrassing, a badge of poverty in town, the weather-worn walls, the stench in summer's heat. We'd heard of two-seaters, companionable. Who had those? Knew the inconvenience of items fallen in, wallets, puppies that needed retrieving. Okay, so you all can relate. A lot of the poems also deal with just family members and different characters. So I'll read a couple of those. Barbershop Ritual. Baby brother couldn't wait. For him, the rite of passage began early, before obligatory heists of candy and comics from neighborhood stores, before street battles to claim turf, before he might gain the title man of the house before his time. Each Saturday he stepped up to the chair, the closest semblance to a throne he'd ever know, and laid in for the cut, the counseling of older dudes, cap'n players, men of words, Greek chorus to the comic, tragic fanfare of approaching manhood. Baby brothers named for two fathers. He'd seek them in that neutral zone of brotherhood where manliness sprouted in new growth week by week, and dark hands deftly shaped identity. Head bowed, church solemn, he'd shed hair like mother love and virginity, weightier than Air Jordans and designer sweats, euphemistic battle gear. He'd receive the tribal standard, a nappy helmet sporting arrows, lightning bolts, rows of lines cut in, New World scarification, or carved logos, Adidas, Public Enemy, and tags like hieroglyphic distress signs to the ancestors. Remember us, remember our names. That one's a little dated, I think. That's a 80s poem. If you recognize some of the, imagery of when everyone's running around shaving things into the back of their fade-away high tops. So, yeah. And I really admired the person who had the Public Enemy logo, the guy in the crosshairs, very intricately carved into the back of his hair. So, okay. This next poem is about a childhood friend, and we all have those friends who's just a little different, kind of out there, kind of on the edge. But who makes childhood bearable because in their craziness they're willing to risk and dare anything for you. So this one is titled Dorothy. Being a foster kid gave her second-class status, but she was still our hero. An outcast like us, she was an ally against school bullies and neighborhood brats. Though we were all poor, she was rejected for more simple-minded human reasons, with smoked dark skin, hair no longer than a snap, and legs covered with sores. Any hope she nursed of being found desirable or cherished was revoked. She retaliated with a physical prowess that awed us. Endless chores gave her muscles to rival the older boys, and she stunned them in short, breathless tussles that often drew blood. We envied her a body whose strength matched its rage. At 14, she could beat a man. In our small world, she seemed invincible, until we learned her one weakness, a love for my brother that, unreturned, provoked the only fight she willingly lost. I think my brother still has some scars from that fight, though. So I guess she could not beat him into loving her. So. But actually, I saw Dorothy not too long ago, about a year and a half ago, when I went back for her foster mother's funeral, and she was happily married with several kids. And I understand that the marriage sort of settled down after she had to beat up her husband a couple of times, sort of put him in line. Okay. see. I guess I'll read just a couple more from those poems. Okay. Hunger. Combing the papers for summer jobs, nothing that seemed absurd now or the obvious hustle was beneath us. Our need was rampant as newsprint, those endless columns of pulp dreams. Not old enough for hire, I fantasized my fortune in stuffing envelopes. Seductive ads beckoned, make dollars, no experience needed, just gut-wrenching desire for anything more. I'd make thousands, save the family, buy my way out of loneliness, invisibility. I sent off letters, stamps tasting of promise, expectations swelling in me like a secret. 2. I yearned for glimpses of freedom like clearings stumbled upon, meadows of unbroken green, edged by trees, yet seemingly endless. Like that, but interior, as in the mind's infinite reaches, hinted at in dreams, or the openness the heart allows each time we choose love. Going into fields where my grandmother eked out a sharecropper's wage, before I learned they weren't hers, they too seemed unbounded by horizon. 3. What I wanted I couldn't name, but the longing felt more real than what I could touch, constant as labor. Some nights I lay on the ground for hours, drunk with that view of the heavens, as if those thousand stars each held me by a thread, their imperceptible shuffle spinning around me some kind of cocoon. So I endured the days and months and years that kept me from adulthood, the time of fulfillment, or so I thought. Growing up brought an end only to a kind of indentured servitude, taught me to distinguish loss from lack. 4. These days it's TV commercials, the happy clan hawking cars and fortified cereals, a kind of contentment bartered for with longing or need. Anything is attainable in fantasy. It takes so much to learn just this. The things we need we don't get in this world. Some say we're lucky to be alive, to have our chance each day to fight, get by. I say, what's luck or chance or choice for that matter? I take the offerings of this slim life. Hunger like memory, some kind of assurance. The body open, unable to be filled. And this poem is called Portraiture, and it's for my parents, because I often try to imagine what it was like for my parents when they first met, that sort of moment that they came together. Because all I know was the life that I had with them, and which was fraught with all kinds of difficulties. So this poem sort of tries to encapsulate that moment. Portraiture for my parents. How a woman angled against a fence becomes a sign. A woman in 1955, just so, inscrutable eyes. She the escapee of one man's fear, his year of weeping. Greeting the world halfway with serious gaze, crisp white sleeveless blouse, full skirt, dime store lipstick, curls. And a man coming into her orbit fixes there. A man lost and sun-drunk like one out of her haunted past, beckoning, respectful, a sign. Of what? Redemption? That green uniform, he never quite escaped its shape, eclipses the sky, the path, the distance she must travel to return home. His eyes are bright, sly, a little kind. They are young, still open, yet the intimation of all that was and is to come flares in that meeting. Convergence, woman, fence, gaze, man, a scene as transport, a moment as bubble in the wind of absolution. There is no absolute, he thinks, yet there she is, creator, indifferent almost, poised to join, will to cause, and he, the seeker, who lays down his things, who follows her. Okay, and I'll read some more recent poems. I decided I wanted to stop talking about my parents and my family, but I found out that wasn't so easy to do. But I wanted to try to think about some of the things that I wasn't privy to. For instance, my parents' meeting. And the interesting thing about my family is that, and maybe this is true of a lot of Southern families, and particularly a lot of black Southern families, that we keep a lot of secrets. And there's a lot of things that we don't know about one another and about things that are going on under our own roofs. So it's always interesting to me the way things sort of come out in our family, the things that I learn about my family, my ancestors, and even my parents and brothers and sisters. My parents had a very difficult relationship. My father was an alcoholic, and he was often violent and abusive. And so there was a lot of violence in my household, which is probably why when I went away to college, I went all the way to New England to get as far away as possible. But anyway, I eventually made peace with my father, who died about 20 years ago. And, having problems here. But this poem is called Reprise, and well, it'll make sense. Reprise. She mentioned it in the matter-of-fact fashion of one who is long past trauma or surprise, a sort of overheard reprise, the way her daughter felt it. Not a simple thing, marriage, beyond its fixedness as history. How to convey the lived-through daily drama of it, except by its defining moments, the simple acts. He got down on his knees, she said. Of course, this was very near the end. Only committed cynics refuse the mediation of priest-confessor, minister, or prayer circle around the bed. And she did not deny her husband and eased passage when he murmured regret for everything he had ever done that hurt her. I had lived through those years of my father's sins, infidelity, insults, beatings, and worse, his self-destruction by alcohol, and had made a meager peace upon the National Mall at the 20th anniversary of Dr. King's March for Justice, the same weekend I learned of his death. Swaddled in collective protest and ennobling anger at a craven world, I had assumed a faint nimbus of instant compassion, allowed him humanness there at his end. But what did I know about forgiveness? Not until my mother told the 20-year-old story did something move in me, dislodging the raft of my father and sending it on, set us free. I'll just read a few more. My mother she is. So anyway, this is a bit of a speculation about that. The child who cried in the womb. I imagine the setting suited her, a small, neat container accommodating her will, its membrane stretching in perfect affirmation of her reach. Even the assorted sounds and the light filtering in, yes, there was a kind of light, merging, reverberating her own pulsing song. But her beginning must have been uncertain, a winter gestation, nature seeking closure, erasure of another cycle, the snow a downy lining for a final bed, the cold stinging reminder that the body is but vulnerable nerve, tenuous flesh. She was at that point a seed, expected like all seeds to endure by turning, first inward to fatten its own heart, then outward to bloom in vegetable beatitude. Yet conceived in such a time, she would have inherited the sorrows of that season, the void left by migrant birds, the sadness of all those who cannot see past interrupted joy. And into her peaceful estuary would come waves of discontent, the daily worries of her would-be father, the drum tide of her would-be mother's fears, echoes of that unnamed territory outside herself, its airy vastness churning, buffeting. The water soothed those discomforts, so she cried. Perhaps then she pondered a permanent lease. That way she needn't decipher the world beyond her boundaries, its rules or who'd made them, or navigate the errant paths they'd laid. In the primordial privacy of her little house, she had sovereignty. She had the leisure of unhurried desire and idea. Later, she would only vaguely remember having relinquished paradise, shedding the supple, snug gourd, amniotic dreams giving way to the quickening of brain, tongue, speech, blossoming from her own tears. And I'll just read, I guess, these two last ones. This one is called West End Winter. And the West End is the area of Atlanta I know best. That's where I teach. And I think it's sort of a complaint poem, too, a sort of lament, you know. It's kind of an anti-pastoral, I guess. I don't drive. I don't have a car. And as I said, this is my first time living in a southern city. And I was not prepared for just the cars, and just, you know, the clutter of the cars and the way you can't ride down the street without worrying about the cars. So I think probably some of that creeped into this poem. But really it's just about, you know, winter. And anyway, West End Winter. I want to say these bare trees make an artful landscape, or frame, or sculpture by their posture, leaning, reaching out and into stark, livid space. That what goes on underneath there once was and once more canopy, if spring is merciful, strives as they do for memorial. But they're indifferent to craft, late afternoons, light prismed through icy air, the soundtrack of chittering congregations, the melisma of birds embellishing stripped branches, day dying in a swirl of careless brushstrokes, tender formations, imaginary lakes in gaps of litmus sky. Winter's inviolable. Immune to my longing for beauty, it dissembles the neighborhood's aboriginal charm. Flowers and grasses in shriveled surrender, the houses somber in their loamy plots. We scant pedestrians dart through its overrun streets amid buses and cars honking coda to traffic lights Morse blinking red, green. Lyric bloom stilled by discordant notes, though I want to say song. And this last one I'll read is a poem that's sort of in response to the lines from a Mary Oliver poem, and she talks about wanting to die on the day where it's just pouring down rain, just this endless, endless rain. And I thought, well, I wouldn't want to die on a day with the weather like that. But then I think last week there was this night when it was just raining, and I was lying on my bed and just hearing the rain, and I was like, I get it, yeah. I could go out like that. But that wasn't what I was feeling when I initially thought about it. And I think, actually, this is really the kind of day I would like for it to be when I died. So this is simply called Poem After Mary Oliver. And the first line is lifted from her line, from her poem. When I have to die, I want to die on a day that is full of sun, when the world is a bowl brimming with light, thickly flowing, overpouring its container. The sky fierce, oniric blue. From dawn's slow blast to the riotous glare of late afternoon, let there be an effusion of radiance everywhere. In the wide brightness, I would feel my heart struggle gently against its tether one last time before rising up to merge with the pulsing current, leaving this vessel of me, as I have done so often, unloosed by warmth and sparkle and buoyant glow. Then I would be glad for the friends who would come from far places in planes sailing through the quicksilver air with cities and nature spread below, who would look out on those bejeweled surfaces reflecting and see all that is left to love. On such a day, the world would go on with its giddy traffic and quiet bloom, and the light filling it would remind us of those parties that last well into the night, and whose countless guests spill through rooms ablaze with music, or drift off to corners to share their life stories. Thank you.